Yeah. All right, we see that we're going to go ahead and start here because I want to give you a biblical example of what we see in the Bible, and then next week I want to give you an example of a biblical example of something that we ought not do, a bad example. So a good example and a bad example. But we'll also find how do we apply this in our life today, because things have changed a whole lot in our life, right? And so how will we apply these systems in our life today? For instance, we have cars now, we don't have camels, right? That's a good thing, all right? We don't have chariots. And so we'll look at that. And so we talked about last week that there's a genuine biblical love and there's a lustly love, right? There's two types of love. And so love is a lousy basis for marriage. And we mentioned this. You talk to any couple that's been married for several years and you ask them what their secret is, and they will tell you love, but it's a biblical love. Let me give you an example. You're not going to always look the way you do 30 years from now. I hate to say that. Okay? You're not going to be preserved. Okay? You're going to continue to age and get older. Sorry to disappoint you. Okay? And because of that, if your marriage is based on a lustly love, then it won't last. The only true love will last is biblical love. We also talked about that I don't have to know a person inside and out before I marry them. The main thing I need to know about them is that they love God. That's the most important ingredient of any other ingredient. If that's not there, there's no interest at all. There's nothing to work with because they cannot have a biblical love. It's impossible to have that biblical love. And you don't want to enter into a relationship with that not being a possibility. Okay? So it's so important that we get that. And so a genuine biblical love is the most important love, and that's what we should base our marriage on. And so Proverbs 31 says, favor is deceitful, and beauty is what? Vain. But a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And that's so important that we get that. So love is learned primarily after marriage. We're going to show you a biblical example of this right now. Okay? Isaac and Rebekah had never met or even had the opportunity to fall in love prior to their marriage. They simply trusted the providence of God and the wise counsel of their respective parents or families. Now, when we look at this story, we see that this is probably a biblical good example of a family. Now, not all of us have that. Not all of us have a Christian family or a good Christian solid family, but we do have our church family. We do have people in our church, and that's what we call our pastor. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, how he can be involved in our lives when it comes to this area. I know so many people that make a choice, even adults, and I got some of them in my mind, even in our church, and obviously I can't say any names, that have made a decision to marry somebody without first consulting the pastor. That is a big mistake. A big mistake. In Genesis 24:6-7, we see that, and Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and what he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. We see, first of all, she became his wife, and then number two, and he loved her. First of all, you can't truly love someone simply just through dating. That's right. You can't, because you can't instantly know them, and you can't know them in only a certain amount that you can know them. So you can ultimately only know them after you've already come together. That's how you truly know someone. You'll see a difference between if you date and then once you marry. Things change a little bit, right? I'm not saying necessarily for the worse, but things do change. You've got to work on some things. And so Isaac loved Rebekah after they were married. That is a biblical love, I'm saying. A biblical love. A true biblical love. We also see that it is rare, if not non-existent, that young persons who are wholly and completely prepared to consider this vital decision of marriage free from fleshly romance and desire. In other words, entering into that relationship with that special someone God's brought into your life, we need to consider how we do it, how we go about it. It must not be based on our fleshly desires and our lusts. It needs to be based on simply the Word of God. It's so important we enter that way. If we start right, we will finish right. Okay? Hollywood movie magazines and most of society would have us believe good marriages are based on modern romance. We see decades of disastrous divorce statistics made up from the shattered homes and lives or the awful evidence of this utter failure. And you can go anytime you want to People Magazine or any other source, and there's always going to be one celebrity every week that's getting divorced. Time and time again. Some have been married 3 and 4 times. Because their relationship started on romance. It started that way. It started the way the world does it. It started in a biblical way. Now, am I saying that a relationship can start in romance and not end right? No, that's not what I'm saying. There's a possibility if people were spiritual, but the chances are going to be slimmer that could happen. All right? Now let's get a story of Isaac and Rebekah. Everybody go, oh. All right. Here we come. All right, here's the Genesis. We see Abraham wanted his son Isaac to marry a woman who would be worthy to receive the blessings that the Lord had promised to Abraham. So I want you to think about it this way. God told Abraham that he would be what? The father of what? Many nations. Okay? The only way that's possible is what happens down his line. If he has children, if they what?
They have
children. But they almost marry in the Lord in order for it to come true. You ever thought about that? If one of them decides not to marry in the Lord, that promise is broken. So if we want to have our children be blessed and their children be blessed, guess what? We got to make the right decision. Wow. Otherwise, we break that chain of blessings. Everything you worked for up to this point, being faithful in church, serving the Lord, could be all for naught simply by you marrying the wrong person. Not being God's will. And then your kids are going to be damaged by that result that you bring to the world. Okay? We see in Genesis 24:3, it says, "And I will make thee swear by the Lord that the God of heaven and the God of earth, that thou shalt" what? Not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites. Now, here's a man, his wife had already died like 3 years before, Sarah, and he's on his deathbed, and one of the most important things for his life, the thing that he's thinking about, is what?
His son.
God's will being lived out through his son. He wanted the legacy to continue. That was his greatest burden, that it will continue on. And so he says, this is the most important thing. This is the first thing. This is the order of business. I want to see this happen before I pass away. Okay? So he went to a person who was faithful. Okay, and we're going to talk about it in a little while. He says, among whom I dwell. He says, now notice this, for example. He was living in a sinful area. He said, if you look at this verse, it says, thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I what? Well, God had called him as a missionary to that area, but there was no one who was available for his son that was in the Lord. So God says, even though we live in a land where there's a lot of wickedness going on, don't choose from among those people. Search for a godly example among those people. It means you may have to find them and search for them, but get one. It says in verse 4, but thou shalt go into my country, into my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. I want you to find a godly example. Look at verse 12. It says, he said, O Lord God, my master, Abraham, I what? I pray thee. He was a praying man. He began to pray before the situation. You should be praying right now about that spouse for you and who God will have for you. Not just go on your instincts. That's not good enough. Or even biblical examples, be also praying to make sure that that's the right one. He says, and send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, and even his prayer, he was a servant of God, Abraham's servant. He was considering his master. He says, I love my master so much. He says, consider him. And so we're going to see how this all comes together in just a moment. He says in verse 13, behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water, and let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she shall say, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy what? Servant Isaac. Even Isaac was a servant. When we look for that one that whom we might marry, we need to make sure that not only that he serves the Lord, but that he's a hard worker. He's not lazy. You know, that's so important. Abraham sent his faithful servant to find another faithful servant for another faithful servant. Did I confuse you?
No.
If I did, that's okay. Still early. All right? So we know that one thing God is important to God is that we need to serve. We need to serve. And thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master. You don't want to marry somebody and then find out that he didn't want to go to church. And he's a bum. You don't want to marry somebody and find out that she's not interested in things of God, doesn't want to have anything to do with God. That's a disaster. You don't want that to happen. If they're not showing it now, they won't share it. They won't show it then. It just won't happen. And then we see in 24:17 it says, and the servant, what? Ran to meet her. Man, look at that. You know, enthusiastic about being used, and said, let me, I what? Again, pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher. And she said, drink, my Lord. And she what? Tasted. That means she moved quickly. You know, we all move at different rates, and maybe you move a little slow in the morning, but when the sun starts moving, it starts warming up, you should start warming up. Amen? I don't have a problem with you moving slow in the morning, but get your juices flowing. If you're like a turtle all day, no, that's an issue, okay? Get it going, all right? And so, drink, my Lord, and she hastened and let down her pitcher upon her hand and gave him to drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also. She's one of those women that didn't wait to be told what to do. She saw the need and she just did it. That's a real servant. You know, as youth pastor here at this church, pastor never comes up to me and says, I want you to do A, B, C, and D. He says, I trust you. If there's something I need to tell you, I'll tell you. Hey, man, he'll tell me if I need to do something. But most of the time, he didn't tell me anything. I have to figure out what I need to do. Sometimes I make bad decisions, sometimes I make good decisions. But I can't sit around and wait for everybody to tell me what to do. When I see a need, I got to be willing to do it. That's the true servant. We got to be willing to see the need and then just do it. Same thing in the youth group. If you're working a youth staff, you see a need, hey, bro, can I help you? Just ask and just do it. I mean, sometimes we need to ask, just do it. If there's a need, do it. We need to do that as young people also. You're here on Wednesday night, there's food on the floor, grab a vacuum and start vacuuming. We shouldn't have our adults clean up after you guys. Everything we do is for you. Take ownership. Show that servitude right now. How can I be a blessing? How can I help? How can I be an encouragement to you guys? That should be our attitude. That starts now. Same thing at home. Mom, Dad, I already washed the dishes. Anything else you would like for me to do? That's a right heart. That's a serving spirit. God can use you. Because if you're not doing that now, it's not going to automatically change when you get married. Yeah, you may do it the first couple of years, but it wears out. That's not really your character. It begins to wear out. So you need to build that character now. And she says, I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking. Now, we're going to talk about this a little later, man. Camels drink a lot of water. Okay? All right? And we're going to talk about that. And she hasted